I was born in 1965 in Vietnam. I was born right in the middle of a civil war in Vietnam. My father was, before the war, was an airline pilot, and all the men were drafted for the war. So I was born in the middle of the war. My dad was in the military. And it was South Vietnam democracy against the North Vietnamese communists. So that was the civil war that was going on, and America was helping with that. So we wanted to leave because, well, I'm trying to make this a little shorter story. Our family is Christian, and in Vietnam, it's a very low percentage, like maybe 10%. I mean, at the time, this is back in 1975. And my father, the communists, we knew that when the communists came, they would persecute the Christians. So we were leaving for religious freedom reasons. And also, because my father was in the military, he knew he would put in re-education camp, never see the family again. So another good reason to leave. So that was what was the deal. But of course, during the war, to leave the country is an act of treason, and you're not allowed to leave. So he was a captain in the Air Force, and my uncle was a lieutenant, and my uncle was a pilot. And he and my uncle schemed to basically borrow a plane. My uncle would fly on missions, and so he had access to a plane, various planes, and they would just borrow one of those planes and leave the country with it. Of course, during that time, the government knew very well that people would want to be leaving the country. So when they sent people out on missions, they would only give them enough gas to go only part of the time. To go just to the mission, and they would have to refill at the mission and then fly back. So they would never have enough gas to actually leave the country. So so they had thought about that and how it worked, and if they had the opportunity, what country they would go to. Anyway, in March of 1975, my uncle was able to get a plane. Kind of a big, long, involved story, but a friend of my dad's also was the pilot for that plane, and my uncle was asked to be the co-pilot. And normally people in two different squadrons aren't allowed to fly together, but someone was sick, and so they had to do that. And so they had the plane, and my uncle called my dad and says, we have a plane basically leaving in 4 hours, so get everything together. We're going to leave the country. But of course, the problem was we wouldn't have enough gas to even go anywhere. And by the way, the plane is a C-130, which is a huge cargo plane that tanks drive into, and you can play volleyball inside it. So it's a huge cargo plane, C-130, Hercules C-130. And it would need, a lot of gas. And anyway, they were fueling up for the mission, and my uncle had discussed it with the pilot. My uncle's a co-pilot, and they tried to delay the flight so that our family would have a chance to catch up and meet them at this abandoned airfield. But on a C-130, there are usually 5 on the crew. There's a pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, some sort of navigator, and then somebody else. So my uncle and the pilot told everyone, look, we're actually going to not fly the mission. We're going to leave the country. You have a choice to come with us or get off. They didn't have any guns or anything with them, so 3 of the people decided to get off, and 2 of the people stayed with us. So, kind of a long story short, we took the plane and we flew to Singapore, where they thought we were drug runners, and they put us in jail for a couple weeks. So, yes, I've been in the Singapore jail. We were going to get sent back. Singapore did not want to be involved with the war. Yep. And so my dad had to talk to the ambassador from Vietnam to Singapore and said, would you go back because the country's going to be falling? And he said, no, he couldn't answer that. And so the Singapore government decided just to send us on to wherever we wanted, which was America. And they paid for it all, and that was the one and only time they did that, because after we left, another group of people with an airplane flew also to Singapore, and they sent them back. So they sent us on to Guam, which was a refugee camp, or a holding place, and then that was when the country fell while we were at Guam. And in Guam, a bunch of soldiers who had left the country and followed us to bring us back for a public execution got to Guam, and then the country fell, so then they had no reason to go back anymore, and they gave us our death warrants in Guam. Yeah, that they had built this public scaffolding, had all these handcuffs ready to bring us back. So that was just a real miracle that we ran into them there, and then from there we went to Camp Pendleton in California. We were waited to get sponsored by an American family, and we were. So then we were in Ohio, and that's when we started living in America.